All these days we've been discussing the importance of the intellect right through the spiritual journey. In fact, even if you're a materialistic person, you need to get your intellect in place. And this intellect is extremely important for two reasons. One is, as human beings, we are the only species in the world that has the capacity to reach out beyond our present abilities and strive for a better state of being. No other creature has that, for which you need the intellect. Second is because we are again the only species in the world that has a choice of action. As Shakespeare put it so beautifully in Hamlet, to be or not to be, that is the question. To improve or to remain where we are, to go downhill or to lift ourselves to higher and higher levels of perfection is a choice that you and I have that's denied to all other species. This intellect is of two types. Gross intellect called Tikshna Buddhi, or subtle intellect, Sukshma Buddhi. The gross intellect, Tikshna Buddhi, is what we are using in the world to negotiate, to manipulate, to maneuver, to do all the analysis and the discrimination that is required of us in the world. But when it comes to self-development, when it comes to the spiritual path, the intellect that you need is Sukshma Buddhi, subtle intellect. It is this subtle intellect that gets you in a state of wonderment, of contemplation, inquiry. This magnificent, fabulous world that has been presented to us, who created it or what created it? To get into this sense of wonderment with every creation, anything in the world, you look at it with the subtle intellect and you can go into raptures. A simple thing like an orange. The packing of that orange is unparalleled. No human being can pack like the way nature can. In such a way that outside it is exposed to dirt and dust and bacteria and infection. And yet inside it is immaculate, sterile. So also within us, our system, our body in its healthy condition is exposed to all kinds of things outside. But what a fabulous system. And yet we have sense organs, we have equipment that open out into the world. And yet within us we have this fabulous system of weeding out infection. Every breath you take, there are thousands, perhaps millions of bacteria and viruses that you could inhale and get infected with. And yet the system has a beautiful mechanism which weeds out infection and leaves you, your lungs are absolutely sterile with it. Isn't that something to wonder about? Isn't that something magnificent? Isn't that a creation that is unparalleled in the world? And it is only your subtle intellect that can get you into that frame of mind. And that's why every spiritual being, everyone who has developed that subtle intellect is in a state of constant ecstasy. Never mind what the world has to offer to him. Because he's clued in, he's aligned with this state of what the Gita calls as Ascharya. When we are endowed with this subtle intellect, it is most ridiculous. It is absurd to sit there and criticize and talk about people or talk about things that you don't have. And to have this negative mindset is like a tumor in the brain. It needs to be removed immediately. All negative thoughts are like the cancerous, more cancerous than any cancer that you can get, because it eats you up. And at any moment of your life, when you are full of negativity, if you sweep it aside and open your heart and mind to this wonderful benevolence that is splashed everywhere, divinity, with your subtle intellect. What a state of bliss you'll enjoy right here and now. I don't know if you're able to understand it, to relate to it. You look at a flower, whatever flower it is. It could be the tiniest of flowers, but a fabulous creation. Have you ever wondered that there is nothing in nature that is gaudy? You go out into the world, I'm not talking about flower arrangements that are done, Japanese or otherwise. Natural, in its natural environment, there's brilliant colors in various different kinds of flowers. Yet, never does it look gaudy. But when you and I decide to design something, unless you are skilled, atrocious. Come on. And that magnificence, that benevolence, that beauty and the grandeur that is splashed in the world, you can access only with your subtle intellect. And so the Gita is all about awakening the subtle intellect within you, getting you clued in. It's the password to all that is beautiful and bountiful in the world. Don't deny yourself this. You have the password. Use it. No animal can sit there and admire the beauties of nature. Only you and I can do that. So why do you want to reduce yourself to an animal? Wake up to your own potential is the message of the Gita. So how do you begin? You begin by number one, understanding that you have a problem. What is the problem? I'm not talking about, I can't get on with my wife, not that kind of problem. Understand you have a problem at awakening this subtle intellect. That this wonderful password of yours is lost to you, you've forgotten it. That's the problem. And how do you go about it? Borrow somebody else's intellect. Consult someone. Reach out. Seek help. This is the first step. This is the problem with us. As against Westerners, a Western person is very objective about it. The moment he understands that I don't have this, I need help, he goes out and seeks help. There's no ego or problem about it. He goes and seeks help. The problem with us is we are in a constant state of denial. Oh, I'm fine, I'm perfect. I don't need anybody. I don't need anything. I'm not suggesting that you should go and see a psychiatrist. That's not the point. And I'm not even suggesting that there's anything wrong with you or any of us. But the fact is that this awakening to the splendor that there is in the world needs a little help, needs a trigger, needs a suggestion, needs tuition. To get that intuition, you need tuition. It's silly things like maths and science, you go and take tuitions. And how can you get, when I say silly, I don't mean, it's gross. It's something that you can learn by yourself. And yet, you take tuitions, you send your children to tuitions, little kids are full time into tuitions. And when it comes to this subtle thing, you have the wrong conviction that you can handle it on your own. Seek help. Then augment it. Augment this development of the intellect, not just with thinking, not just with analysis, not just with knowledge. Augment it with devotion and service. Even when a person has a problem, like an addiction, alcohol, anger, whatever it is, however much you try and help the person through analysis, if he's not capable of correcting himself through analysis, what helps is devotion. I say, have a heart. Think of your children. You're in a place of responsibility. You owe it. You owe it to your employees. You owe it to your shareholders. You owe it to the country. You can't afford the luxury of falling to pieces. This is what Krishna tells Arjuna. Arjuna, you're not an ordinary person, you're a prince. And you, of all the people, cannot afford to break down. When he tells Arjuna that, he's telling all of us, we are the privileged class, we are the leaders of society, we are what we call as educated elite. You cannot afford to just allow a breakdown. You have to pull yourself together. You are in a leadership role automatically because you have received so much in life. So augment it with devotion. Feel for your people, feel for your family. And then you put yourself together. You know, in our Indian tradition, you have, for instance, in the south, there are people who are extremely indulgent, they eat all kinds of things, they drink and all sorts of things. But when it comes to these 40 days of Ayappa, you familiar with this? Instantly they give up everything. This is devotion. At least for those 40 days. Here, Shravan. During the month of Shravan, you may do whatever you like the rest of the time. A devoted person will follow certain norms. So this devotion helps. Service. The same aggressive energy with which you chase things for yourself, for your selfish, self-centered interests, the same dynamism, the same aggression. I don't mean aggression in a wrong way. Dynamism you should employ in doing service to others. Paul Mellon, one of the billionaires that this world had, he says, it's not wholesome to hang on to wealth greater than what you need. It's a magnificent statement. It's not in your interest. It's not wholesome for you to hang on to wealth that is more than what you need. And here we are hanging on to wealth enough for the next 10 generations. And you know what happens? It never lasts 10 generations. One generation goes through it, squanders it. In Delhi, some time ago, I happened to attend a wedding in which they had spent 2.5 crores on just decoration. I'm not talking about the wedding expense. Decoration, 2.5 crores. It's completely out of sync with the society, what the average Indian has. We are not suggesting you should have a, laborer's wedding. But some parity, there must be some sense of what do I owe to society. In our tradition, whenever there is a wedding, whenever there is something good happening, a birthday or a wedding or anniversary or whatever it is, first thing you should do is do service. Then comes indulgence. If you don't follow that, then you know what happened? The same wedding where 2.5 crores was spent on decoration, packed up in 6 months' time. So, service-mindedness. Then have a sense of commitment. Fix a schedule for yourself. This is what I need to do in 1 year. This is what I need to do with myself in 6 months, 3 months, this month, this week, today, right now. So you negate this thing of an idle mind is the devil's workshop. It's so true. The best minds, the most cultivated, refined person, the moment he's idle, he'll think of all sorts of junk to do. So you keep yourself busy, keep yourself on track, and you'll find that all these distractions and silly thoughts won't enter your mind. You're too busy to even think of all these things. And the last thing is shift your focus from mere likes and dislikes to obligation. This is another thing that Krishna tells Arjuna. Arjuna, you have an obligation, and so do we all. If you remain focused on your obligation, you won't have time to think of what you like or dislike. The next thing we need to do is assess the strength of the mind. The mind is not something to take lightly. It has a power of its own, particularly if you've been indulgent. So what does it do? It overwhelms you in minutes. Take the case of Arjuna. He was well prepared for the battle. If you take a look at the first chapter. And he sits in the chariot. Krishna is his charioteer. And at the last minute he tells Krishna, please drive me between the two armies so that I can assess the strength of the enemy. Take one last look to finalize the strategy. He's fully prepared for battle. And Krishna drives him between the two armies. He takes one look at the people on the other side, and within minutes he crumbles. This is what happens to us. At any moment in your life, you give in to the mind and destruction is almost instantaneous. You think, Oh, what difference does it make? It's just one party, it's just one night, it's just one little swig of something, it's just one little dose of something. And that one thing, one act of indiscrimination, one act of indulgence can finish you off. It paralyzes you. When the mind is agitated, the intellect can't think straight. When the intellect can't think straight, your action comes to a grinding halt. This is again what happened to Arjuna. A warrior of exceptional valor and ability puts down his bow and arrow and tells Krishna, I can't fight. My knees are knocking. Ashrupurna Kulekshanam. He's sitting there with tears in his eyes. It's a pathetic sight. Completely paralyzed. It distorts your vision. It warps your view completely. You start thinking things and believing things which are not true. Typical case example of this is in Hamlet. Hamlet is so agitated over the death of his father that he sees things. He sees his father's ghost. He goes into his mother's room and says, Mother, don't you see my father right here? Where? In the pillow. And his mother says, Hamlet, poor thing, you're sick. That's what we all do. When the mind is agitated, when some little thing gets into your system and is agitating you, you project all kinds of things on others and you believe that to be true. This is the height of self-hypnosis. And all of us are doing this. You don't realize it till it's too late. People who are benefactors, people who mean well, people who are doing good to you all the time, you suspect them, you project all kinds of negativities on them, distance yourself from them, and then you're left with people, sweet talkers, who are really not interested in you, but are simply flattering. Warps your vision completely, and then leads to what is known as false vairagya. Shmashan vairagya you've heard of? When you're suffering, and the extremity of this is when you lose a loved one, family member is gone, you get into this shmashana vairagya. Shmashan vairagya means at that point in time, you're suffering so much that you are willing to give up everything. But that's temporary, you must understand this. Arjuna says that. Arjuna tells Krishna that it's much better to beg for alms. Who's saying this? A kshatriya, a ruler, a person of wealth and valor. For him to talk about begging for alms is ridiculous. The same person later on, once the cloud passes, he fights for his rights and he wins and he enjoys that kingdom. So this false vairagya you must watch out for. Then it makes you subservient. The mind then leads you into blind alleys. And the last thing is you compromise on values, principles. That's the last nail in the coffin. So, why do you give in to your mind is the question. Instant pleasure? You see, even to entertain negativities about another person, it gives you pleasure. This is what, again, Shakespeare says, talks about jealousy in Othello. Unnecessarily, this guy decided to get jealous of, what's his name? No, Iago is the villain of the piece. He believes, Iago is the one who plants this thought in Othello. That here, Desdemona is interested in this other guy. I forgot his name. And he gets jealous. And it is this jealousy that consumes him. Why does he think negatively of the person? Because at that point in time, it pleases you to think negatively. It gives you instant joy. Second, you're ignorant of the consequences. You have no idea where this mind is going to lead you and how it's going to destroy you. Third, your intellect is not strong enough to handle anything. So therefore, the message to us is it's not such an impossible situation. We already have an intellect. The problem is the existing intellect we're not using. It's like, the other day somebody told me, you have money and you're keeping it in a savings account. It's like every day you're throwing money out of the window. Judicious investment of your money is necessary. Similarly, judicious investment of the intellectual strength that you already have, start with that. And then it will lead to more and more intellectual strength. So it's not a hopeless situation, it's well under our control. And now he moves on to verse 40. If you remember yesterday, Arjuna's question is, what happens if I put in effort in the spiritual path and I fail to reach the end? I die before I achieve it. What happens to such a person? And the answer he gives in verse 40.
Shri Bhagavanuvacha Parthanaiveha namutra Vinashastasya vidyate Nahi kalyana krut kaschid Durgatim tata gacchati.
The blessed Lord said, Krishna very lovingly answers Arjuna's question. He says, O Partha, such a one does not perish either in this world or the next. O beloved, never does the doer of good meet with misfortune. In this verse, he is trying to make us understand the power of righteousness. When you're on the right track, and when you're doing what your conscience bids you to do, that is the most powerful action. It will stand by you irrespective of what else happens to you. So, examples of this are, Oliver Goldsmith says, I have been young and now I am old. Yet never saw I the righteous man forsaken, or his seed begging their bread. The only insurance you have against misfortune is righteousness, and that's the only thing we're not prepared to do. You go buy insurance, but this insurance which comes for free, you don't want. Examples where righteousness has paid off is Arjuna. Just before the battle became imminent, the battle of Kurukshetra, Krishna was equally friendly or had very close ties with both sections, the Pandavas and the Kauravas, because they were one family. So Duryodhana and Arjuna, commanders-in-chief of both the enemy forces, decide to go and ask Krishna for help, because both of them understand that without Krishna's help it's not possible to win. So apparently the story goes that Krishna was lying down relaxing. A man of perfection is one who's constantly relaxed. So Arjuna and Duryodhana both went to him. Arjuna was humble, devoted, and he went and sat at his feet. Duryodhana was like us, arrogant. So he went and sat near his head. So when Krishna opened his eyes, when you're lying down, who do you see? You see someone who's at your feet. So he saw Arjuna first. And he shut up and he said, he saw Duryodhana. He said, to what do I owe this honor? Two kings, princes coming to me. And they both said, Krishna, we want your help in battle. Krishna means Atman. Atman is neutral. Krishna was neutral to both of them. And he said, okay, I'll make an equitable distribution. One party will get all my military prowess, my armies, the soldiers, the ammunition, even nuclear power, everything. And the other party will get me alone, unarmed. Now, who should choose first? He says, in all fairness, since I saw Arjuna first, I'll give him the first choice. Arjuna, without batting an eyelid, says, Krishna, I don't care if you're alone or unarmed, I want you. And Duryodhana, foolish that he was only too happy to settle for his armies. And thus it was that both the armies, they were imbalanced in a way because the Kauravas were much stronger than the Pandavas. But Arjuna had no problem with that because he understood he had Krishna with him. The power of righteousness. And as it turned out, it was Krishna's impeccable logic and guidance and this fabulous message of the Gita that helped Arjuna get over the challenge that was faced before him. The message to us is, what do we choose? Do we go for material things in our choices? What kind of friends do we cultivate? Do we want to make friends with people who are celebrities? Do we want friends who are rich and famous? Or do we want friends who are good? Not necessarily good in terms of saying good things to us, but who will stand by you, who point to the right direction, even if what they say is unpleasant in the beginning. And so it was with Krishna. Krishna was not flattering Arjuna. Krishna told him the blunt truth, and the truth is always difficult to swallow.